8 to 10 a.m. and you are listening to Salam.
So it's so interesting, just last night, I thought of tweeting something and I delayed the tweet until this morning. And my tweet, in many ways, says something like this. When you vote for a political party in 2024, make sure, ask them who their cabinet will be if they win the majority. And if they don't win the majority and if they're part of a coalition, then ask them who their coalition partners will be. So you know exactly who you're voting for. Because in effect, you're going to have two votes, literally one vote, but two different votes, one for the party to win the majority, but the other is where will that party side with, who will they side with in the event of a coalition. That I think is particularly topical as I chat to Mmusi Maimane on the show, and it's interesting, I've got like 5 days left with the show, so looking forward to talking to him and a whole range of other people. He's the leader, well, former leader of the DA, of course, but now the leader of Build One South Africa. Mmusi, I appreciate your time. Good morning.
Good morning, and good morning to all South Africans. Wishing all Muslim South Africans a peaceful and a reflective period of fasting at this time. So,
absolutely, and it's pretty hectic as well, even within those days of reflection, I can tell you, right? Anyway, you're doing your own reflecting. You get an invitation from the DA leader, John Steenhuisen, to be part of a Moonshot Pact Convention, and you responded. So, firstly, what is your understanding of this Moonshot Pact Convention from the DA?
Well, I think first and foremost, we must start with the grand question, which is what is to happen in 2024. There are a few common fundamentals that we all know and have always known. That 2024 will usher in a coalition government of some sort at a national level, and we all know that the ANC naturally will drop below 50%, and therefore we need to configure that. So any idea of a coalition is not new. I've all permanently been calling for it. The second issue is the fact that you can't just coalesce for positions. So in response to Mr. Steenhuisen, as I've responded to anyone else and have laid out myself what conditions ought to be, is that it can't just be the removal of the ANC or the EFF combination. It has to be predicated on an alternative vision for South Africa. So,
Mmusi, if I could just rewind just for a moment. I mean, I hear you, and I want to hear what your thoughts are. But in terms of the invite to this Moonshot Pact Convention, what did the invite tell you? What was it asking you to do?
No, it's asking us to join a pact so that we can remove the ANC EFF.
Okay, so now let's talk. Yeah, okay, got that right. And you have some issues around that, or are you supportive of that?
No, I'm simply saying that that is an insufficient condition. That's what happened in Johannesburg. That's what's happening in Ekurhuleni. Parties got together to remove the ANC, and now we have a revolving door of mayors. The point I'm really trying to drive home is we have to craft an alternative vision. So my response to the pact of any kind is to say, here's a 10-point plan. We got to talk about jobs. We got to talk about safety, education, make sure we articulate how we eradicate corruption, build an ethical state, keep the lights on. All of the issues. So that when South Africans go vote, they are not just saying, I'm not voting for black, green, and gold. I'm voting or red or blue or yellow, or whatever the color is. But I'm voting for this vision. Because life after the ANC or the majority government must look like this. That's what we want to invite people to. The second condition is that it can't just be a coalition of parties. It has to involve religious leaders, civic society, various role players, because at the end of the day, this is about South Africa and their lives. And then the last thing is, if you want to be a part of the pact, it better be one party, one vote, not we are the biggest and these ones are the smallest, because once you enter into that kind of relationship, then you end up, again, typically, what's happened in the local government, but you end up with a sort of Bassman's scalp, if I could use that term. And it just simply is unworkable.
Okay, I mean, those points are well made, right? So let's say this, right? As a starting point, the invite came from the DA. The invite itself did not come from a let's call it a loose coalition of parties in an interim sitting around the table. Does that jar you already, that the invite coming from the DA specifically already is an invite getting off the wrong footing?
No, and I think that's the first mistake. I mean, it's irrelevant to me who it comes from. I have no issues with the DA. We have different visions. Just because we disagree does not mean we should hate each other. I recognize the fact that their vision is to deal with minorities, or at least that's my interpretation. Mine is to build with all South Africans. So that brings a distinctive right there. But the other point I'm making is that prior to this invitation, already there were discussions with every other party. There was a study tour that was undertaken in Denmark last year, where parties went. We had a meeting earlier on in this year where we met, and the DA declined it. And then we've had multiple meetings with other parties to say, how do we build broader in society? So that they've brought on another invitation is simply at another level going to disturb the other parties, because the work was already happening.
Yeah. Okay, got that. So will you therefore attend, or does your conditions, your 10-point plan need to be met first?
They are vital, because if you just attend, then you are just a passenger on the DA's plan. And I don't support their vision for South Africa. Otherwise, I would have stayed in the organization and should endorse it. So at the end of the day, it has to work with that plan. If we don't do that, then let's go that we will end up just discussing positions, and then positions will change.
So I'm looking at that. I mean, I see some parties have confirmed they're attending, others haven't. Just 15 parties were invited. So let's just say that let's get to the obvious. Doesn't matter which parties you and I may be supportive of, right? I think one thing we all agree on: South Africa currently is in a mess. There's no doubt about it. From where you sit at Build One South Africa, for where I sit as a apolitical vision of building a champion nation, there's no question we have serious problems. But if in our united vision to build something greater, we all put together a 10-point plan, so other parties, Action SA does it, and every other one, I mean, isn't there a danger that this convention will never get off the ground?
Well, I think that's, given that it's a year before election, that is a bit like setting up a CODESA of some sort, so that we can have a proper discussion. Because then, before you discuss any other thing, you must spend an inordinate amount of time really debating issues about how do we fix energy, how do we keep people safe, how do we think the state as it works at the moment with all provinces works? Do you want direct elections? These spark the discussion you want to have. Because at the end of the day, once you've done all of those things, you can then, when you go to election 2024, a year on from now, really have a pact that's substantive rather than a loose arrangement. It's a bit like trying to arrange a marriage and simply just saying, no, we'll sort out where the house is, where we live, all of those things after. Don't worry about it. We'll deal with it then. The risk we face as South Africa, to your earlier point that South Africa is in a mess, is that all you'll end up doing is just changing the colors of who's in executive, but govern exactly the same way, which will deliver exactly the same outcomes.
And to be fair, yes, we've seen evidence of that in the city of Johannesburg and in the Tshwane municipality. We've seen this musical chairs, and I've made the point as well, saying that it's clear in this failed coalitions the first casualty are the people. It seems like it's pretty obvious to me the people are just by the way, they're just left by the side. So you saying this moonshot for you would be this CODESA for 2024, right? That means, if I understand you correctly, you talking about a series of talks, not just one weekend away, that could take even 6 months before you come to some sort of resolution, right?
Absolutely. Otherwise, we'll do a disservice to the people of this country.
So would part of that, of those talks, include therefore all the parties in effect acquiescing to a bigger movement? Let's just, I can't say what Build One South Africa, that would be yours, but let's just say a movement for South Africa, and that means that movement is how the offer to stand for election, or would you still say that each party must then fight their own election and this will only happen after that?
No, what I'm saying is if you then create an umbrella body, you can have a modality as to how it will stand for elections. That's what's going to be. Because our system at the moment, remember, I heard you inform people that they're going to get 2 ballots. Actually, next year's Electoral Act is going to change. We'll have 3 ballots. So there's implications to what you do with direct elections, all of those things. Once we know the modalities of what the IEC and the electoral bill looks like, then you can craft a umbrella body that works towards that. That is effectively what we've got to get right. And then we've got to sit down and say, does 1 + 1 in fact equal 2? Because sometimes you can merge parties. You can bring 2 parties together and hope they'll get you more. They may get you less. Because when you say to yourself, maybe if the Freedom Front was to join up with the DA, does that mean the votes of 2 parties is an addition of what they would have got last year, or is an addition of what happens between the 2? You may find voters find that actually not something they want. So all of this has to be predicated on what is best for the people of South Africa, knowing the desperate need for change, because we just can't keep going the same way we're going.
And your thoughts about, I mean, you made the point, it can't just be the 15 parties invited. It needs to be far more inclusive civil society, as well as, faith-based organizations, right? But on the other hand, it does specifically exclude the ANC and the EFF, and therefore puts up this grouping as a challenger to the other parties on the in this boxing ring, so to speak, right? Do you concur with that? Outside the point that you made that you must have a bigger vision, but do you concur that you need a bigger vision on the one hand, but at the same time that it is critically important to keep the ANC EFF out of power?
I'm alive to how dangerous a combination between the ANC and the EFF would be, but that doesn't change the fact that the ANC itself, let me just treat that as a party, will have a significant chunk of the vote. It's not going to go from 50 to 0. So we have to think hard about what does that mean, because the ANC is not just a political party. It's also got infrastructure inside the bureaucracy. You've got civil servants that are part of the ANC. That's what cater deployment has achieved. So a conversation must be had with them. How do we peacefully transition? How do we make sure that it itself behaves in a democratic way? And also, you must then convince me that the exclusion of one party, what is the basis of that? If it's just merely you don't like their policies, whether they're on land or whatever, then you must tell me what your redress policy is, because the issue doesn't disappear because you don't like the party that raises it. The issue still exists. So the last point I'll make is, I would certainly stand with South Africans that say an ANC-EFF coalition next year would be disastrous, not because I also see its evidence happening in the municipalities today. That's what you have in Joburg. That's what you have in Ekurhuleni, with just puppet mayors who are fronting for those. So we've got to stop that because we've got practice at it. But it's got to be replaced by something that's sensible.
Therefore, I mean, would part of your conversation suggest that actually we'll talk to everybody? We'll talk to the EFF as well as the ANC and see if we can convince them that if it's a majority election where one party wins the 50+1, they don't have to speak to you, understandably so. But if it's 50 below, whoever, that means you are prepared to talk to everybody to form this coalition, not of one grouping versus another, but a coalition of all South African parties, because all have got below 50, and therefore we have to find a way to agree to sit around a table.
Yeah, we have to build a government that works for all the people.
So to confirm, the line may have just dropped for a sec. You would be willing to talk to both the ANC and the EFF?
Absolutely, because I would talk to them, and I would make sure that we all have a similar even view on issues of corruption and state capture. We must deal with those issues.
So, I mean, here's the thought. I mean, if you're talking civil society, then I'm certainly interested in being part of this conversation. But I'm looking beyond that. I'm looking at the EFF. Or rather, I'm looking at the DA, who's like saying we will not talk to enemy number one, which is the EFF, right? I'm looking at Herman Mashaba, your former colleague at the DA, who's saying I will quit Action SA if they even want to engage in any conversations with the ANC. And then you look at yourself, once of the DA, and obviously previously that a supporter of the ANC. I'm just looking at those three parties before we even get to the others, right? You're going to have difficulty convincing them to agree to your point of view.
No, but that's democracy. It has to be negotiated, and we have to talk. Let me conclude by saying that I worked. You'll remember when we worked coalitions in Johannesburg. Some of them were. We had the EFF helping us elect mayors, etc., and they lost it. Let's be honest. When I ran coalitions in 2016, in the main, Herman Mashaba resigned for DA internal politics, not because the coalition fell apart. And it was the same in Tshwane. So, in truth, I've seen how we can work these things out and get them right. If you have a plan, if you have an absolute intentionality about how you work with citizens, and you deliver against that plan, and you're not arrogant to think that because you have the largest share, that you should dictate everything, but you actually are willing to work with people.
So just give us an insight into that very quickly. I mean, the modus operandi of coalitions that work versus coalitions that do not work is what?
The modus operandi is you need a leadership that is committed to meeting regularly, having a conversation about the plan that you've got. And if you will recall, I used to have regular briefings to say, this is what Joburg is doing, this is what Tshwane is doing, this is what even Nelson Mandela Bay, with all of its dilemmas, Bantu Olomisa and I used to fight permanently. But we knew that we needed to get this thing working, and these were the exercises that we had to do. And even when things became tough, I can remember sitting when debating motions of no confidence, how we can resolve those. Because these things are important because they must serve citizens. And when you do the measurements of citizens' impression of whether the government was working for them or not working for them, you will remember that there were improvements across all the metros from 2016 to 2018 because we worked hard at that delivery program. They don't work when you coalesce on race. You say let the black parties work together or white parties work together. They don't work when they coalesce for corruption, where you say employ our people and we'll trade this, and that's when you do positions. And they don't work where they're just regionally minded.
Have you, I mean, your response to the invitation from the DA has been a written response to them, right? Setting out your own vision and your own view, right? Has the DA responded to that?
No, I'm awaiting their response.
Okay, and you haven't WhatsApp Johnston hasn't ever and unofficial chat about it to get his response either.
No, I have not heard anything from that. I've kept a very deliberate line about saying here's what the conditions are, and I hope he gives me a considered and a measured response in that regard. Okay,
lastly, as you talk, and there's a series of small parties that are being formed ahead of the election. I think the Rise in Mzansi, which is an offshoot of the Rivonia grouping, now coming together, I think this week as well, right? Where does that leave you in terms of your vision? Because I remember when you started Build One South Africa, we had the municipal election at that time. It was at the moment we will support independence, right? And you were pushing for the line of independent candidates must form this alliance. I mean, so where are you now? Is Build One South Africa a party on its own or a supporter of a range of independents going to 2024?
We have established, we've in the 6 months that we've started, we engaged all the independents, put them under one umbrella body. We've registered with the IEC as a political party so that people know where to vote in one place. We've created an infrastructure where we're started in all 9 provinces. And in all fairness, we're recruiting members and ensuring that communities are engaged. We're signing up with community-led organizations, civil society to be part of Build One South Africa, and we're inviting business to be part of that voice. So for us, this is not about who's doing what. We have a vision to build one South Africa, and we're doing it, and we're delivering. In instances already now, we're setting up projects in communities to deliver for communities. So I've stuck deliberately with a vision of saying it must be by the people and literally let the people run their own destiny, elect their own candidates. We are inviting them to do so, and they're putting them on our list. And when it's said and done, we will ensure that we deliver against that. That's the job that we've got to do.
And finally, in doing that, outside the Moonshot Convention, right? What do you think? I mean, what's the higher road in terms of what's your expectations in terms of Build One South Africa, in terms of maximum percentage of vote and minimum, realistically?
We are working to maximize all our votes, and we want to enter into a space where at least if there are 4 people sitting around the table, Cyril Ramaphosa, John Steenhuisen, Mmusi, Maimane, and Julius Malema, and we have to decide what happens. That we've got to be in that room, and that means beating the EFF. That's about ensuring that we're the biggest alternative in this country.
But therefore, I mean, your percentage of vote to be able to be taken seriously.
Sorry.
Your expected percentage of vote under Build One South Africa, what do you think it will be?
I'm looking at that
table. I'm looking at that table because you want to be taken seriously, right? If you're going to get a 0.25%, you're not going to be taken seriously.
I have to get beyond 12%.
Okay, and you think you will?
Yes, I'm convinced that we'll be able to get it. That's why I wouldn't say it otherwise.
And why are you convinced?
I must apologize, Ashraf. The invitation was for till 8:10. I apologize, but let me finish the conversation by saying I'm convinced because we've shown even in the first 6 months we're the fastest growing party in the 6 months, and we've been able to engage all sectors of community. That's what we've been able to do.
Okay, that's fine. And yes, we've taken longer. Much appreciated. Maybe if you can answer this last thing, then I'll let you go. Right? If you're going to get the 12, because you say numbers suggest that, where would you get it from? Would you get it from the ANC, from the EFF supporters, from the DA? Where would they come from?
We know so far that at least over 5.4 million South Africans who are sitting in the middle have nowhere to vote. The largest party in this country is the undecided vote. And we also know that 19 million South Africans are not registered to vote or are not participating in our democracy. And those are the people that we've got to engage.
And I think as we leave it there, you're spot on with that. The largest party in South Africa is the undecided vote. Mmusi Maimane, great chatting to you. Looking forward to seeing what comes out of the Moonshot Convention and, of course, 2024. Ultimately, and you know this and I know this, goodness, we want South Africa to become this champion nation. How we get there, we can have that debate all along, but we desperately need us to be working on all fronts to ensure that the country works as opposed to failing as it is right now. Appreciate your time. That's Mmusi Maimane, the leader of Build One South Africa, BOSA. How do you pronounce it? BOSA? Like a boss? I don't know. Build One South Africa is certainly what they are. Fascinating conversation around that and his response to the DA Moonshot Convention, the Moonshot Pact Convention. What do you make of that? You can WhatsApp 0617660355 voice notes. You can tweet. You can post at the bottom of any of the shared social media content coming through from Salam Media. And in fact, if you want to engage me as well on social media, feel free to do that. Let's talk about the goings on in Sudan, and then we'll get to Fidel Hafford. You'll give her thoughts on understanding what's really going on with the Guptas. All of that in a moment.